So as I mentioned earlier, this morning I'm speaking on impermanence. I'm speaking specifically on being comfortable with uncertainty. Comfortable with uncertainty. I was driving through a little town in Northern California a few months ago, and I came upon this interesting shop. And it was a watch repair and clock repair shop. And the name of the shop was Uncertain Times. I thought, what a great name. What a great name. And it's a great name for the times we live in, wouldn't you say? Uncertain times. But then I was thinking, you know, when you review history, was it ever otherwise? You know, really, I don't know that any time was a certain time. The famous mathematician John Paulo said, uncertainty is the only certainty there is, right? Knowing how to live within security is the only security. So that's quite something to ponder. And the Buddha taught extensively on impermanence, that everything that comes also goes. Everything that lives must die. Everything that is created must crumble. And this is not bad news. This is not bad news. This is simply the nature of existence. We only suffer because we want it to be otherwise. Have you noticed that? We only suffer because we want what's impermanent to be permanent, right? It's interesting. But we can learn to find peace and even beauty in impermanence. For me, in the last 20 years, the two biggest lessons, you've heard me talk about them a lot because I'm still processing them and learning from them, but the two biggest lessons for me was number one, losing my home in the Paradise Fire, in the campfire. That was a new experience for me, all my possessions, and you know, that was definitely a deep teaching on impermanence. It's one thing to learn it as a concept, right? It's so different to have a direct experience like that of it. That was life-changing. And that really pushed me into exploring impermanence at a level I never had before. And also learning to trust life. That's what I felt like that experience asked of me so deeply. And then the second thing was losing my mom, you know, and I've talked about that so much. That was such an experience of impermanence to the core for me. And then trusting life, and even when it's taking me into the territory of like the most profound grief I've ever known, unknown territory, really. So what is it to trust life? What is it to trust life? You know, it's similar to when we trust a person. How do you feel when you, tell me what you feel when you trust someone? What does that feel like? Safe. Wow, that was a unison response. Safe, yes. What else? At ease. At ease. Thank you, Nancy. Valued. Beautiful. Who said that? Yes, love that. Valued. Love. You feel loved? Yes. What else? What is it to trust? Open. Beautiful. Yes. Empathized with. Thank you. Acceptance. Yes. Respect. Yes. Connected. Comfortable with vulnerability. Well said. Yes. Wow. You guys are the advanced class here. I think we could all just give this talk together. But yes, you've got it. I mean, we don't have fear, right? We can let down our guard because we feel safe, like you said. We feel like we're in good hands, right? So life is the same. When we trust life, it's life. We trust life as a good friend and a good teacher. You remember that Einstein quote. I don't remember it verbatim, but basically he says, you have to choose. Do you think this is a benign universe or a malign? You know, you have to decide that. So when we can meet what life is bringing right now without fear, without hand-wringing, without worry and anxiety, that's trusting life. And it really is having faith in the goodness that God is, whatever word we like best, right? Or life. It's having faith in the goodness that life is. So you might say, well, how can I trust life when the world is literally on fire, right? When I have doubts arise myself, I often turn to this beautiful teaching from Jesus that reminds us that there is a peace beyond the mind's understanding. Our minds are evolving. How much do we use? What's that percentage? I've heard 10%. We are evolving, and we have this amygdala that kept us safe from tigers a long time ago, right? And that amygdala part of our brain taught us focus on what there is to fear for a good reason. But things are different now. Mostly there aren't tigers chasing us, right? A bear did walk through our yard yesterday, but Jesus said in John 14:27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Be fearless." So he's saying that there is a peace, this is how I interpret it, there's a peace untouched by impermanence. That's what Gandhi said in that quote I read earlier. There's a peace untouched by change, right? There's a peace that is not affected by conditions. It's unconditioned, right? And so that peace says, keep letting go of fear, keep letting go of anxiety, be in peace, everything changes, you can find peace with that. I need that whispered into my ear about 5 times a day. When you trust in life, you don't judge things like you used to. Okay, that's one of the things that I've learned. Eckhart Tolle has a fantastic quote. Let me read this. Do you truly know what is positive and what is negative? Do you have the total picture, right? There have been many people for whom limitation, failure, loss, illness, or pain in whatever form turned out to be their greatest teacher. I agree with that. It taught them to let go of false self-images and superficial ego-dictated goals and desires. It gave them depth, humility, and compassion. It made them more real. Boy, to me, that is the description of deep grief. Boy, it just does this thing. It makes you real. You can't bear anything that isn't real or trivial. And it makes you so much more compassionate for everyone, right? Everyone and all the loss we all face, right? In the impermanent world we live in, right? You've heard the saying, it's all good. Does anybody drive you crazy saying that? It's something that my mom would say. She would say, all's well. She always loved to say all's well, right when she'd pick up the phone or when she'd hang up the phone, she would say all's well. And I actually loved it. I hear her saying that to me so often when I'm doubting, right? I hear saying, all's well, Kathy, all's well. So I have a story about that. So once upon a time, there was this king who had a servant, and they became good friends, and they traveled together. And the king got a real kick out of this servant because he would always say, it's all good. It's all good, right? He'd always say, it's all good no matter what happened. Well, one afternoon they were out in the countryside hunting, and the servant was packing the king's gun with gunpowder, and they were just chatting away, and he wasn't paying attention. He put in too much gunpowder, and when the king shot the gun, it blew his thumb off. And, you know, he's like, oh no, and the servant goes, it's all good, and the king didn't think so at all. And so when they got back, he said, you're going to have some kind of a punishment. You can't cause bodily harm to the king and have nothing happen. So they had a trial, and the servant had to go to prison for 6 years. Well, about a year later, the king is traveling, and the king gets captured by a cannibalistic tribe, right? And they've got him over this big pot of boiling water, and they're about to lower him into the pot. And then they see that his thumb's missing, and the chief says, stop, we don't eat imperfect food. So they took him and they just let him go. They just dumped him by the roadside. So he was walking back, and he was feeling so bad about his servant, right? So as soon as he got back, he pardoned his servant, and he went to see him just to apologize profusely. And the servant, when he heard his apology, said, no, it's all good. If I hadn't been in prison, I would have been with you on that trip. It's good. It's all good. Oh. So the revealing word, it's a metaphysical dictionary that Charles Fillmore created. And in that, Charles Fillmore describes optimism as the inclination to expect good. The inclination to expect good. The practice of seeing God all good everywhere. It is a sturdy belief in the goodness of reality. And I like that, sturdy belief in the goodness of reality. Fillmore was inspired by a teaching from Paul in his epistle to the Romans that says, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. So I was thinking, what does that mean, called according to the purpose of God? I can, if I put it in terms, called according to the purpose of life or the purpose of evolution, it makes sense. It makes more sense to me. So I interpret it as being aligned with life, being aligned with evolution, doing our best to find peace with change, right? Even though our biology is wired to make us creatures of habit, right? We like to get everything just so and keep it that way. So we are consciousness inhabiting this biological suit, right? And as consciousness, we can overcome limitations of our biology. It was interesting. I last week saw the post of the Oroville fire, the Thompson fire. And, I was the minister at the Unity of Oroville for 4 years, so I love them. I've got, a lot of dear friends, dear ones down there, including a little goddaughter that texted me and said, what did she say? She said, we're excavating. I did not know there was a fire, so I wrote her back and I said, what, are you putting in a pool? Which is not a bad thing to say, I guess, if there's a fire. She said, no, evacuating. Oh, evacuating. So, I found myself definitely feeling some anxiety, right, and some worry in my body. And perhaps PTSD a little bit, just rising up. And I just know to be present with it, and it would pass, and it would return, and I would notice it, and I would breathe. And I realize I'm still learning to find peace with impermanence. Anybody else? Yeah? You're not masters yet? I think we all are. I think that's one of the really big lessons for us. And it's why it's so important to talk about it. Take it out and put it on the table and look at it from all sides, right? Everything is impermanent. Everything is impermanent. Countries are impermanent. Governments are impermanent. Forests are impermanent. Homes are impermanent. Relationships are impermanent. Even the life that we are living, each one of us, that's impermanent, right? But strange as it sounds, the Buddhists speak of impermanence as the goodness of reality. I really love that. Let me explain. Pema Chodron, a wonderful Buddhist teacher, she explains, and this is how she puts it. Just as the four seasons are in continual flux, winter changing to spring, to summer, to autumn, just as day becomes night and then becomes day again, just as light becomes dark and becomes light again. In the same way, everything is constantly evolving. Impermanence is the essence of everything. It is babies becoming children, becoming teenagers, and then adults, then old people, and somewhere along the way dropping dead. Impermanence is meeting and parting. It's falling in love and falling out of love. And so we can learn to respect impermanence. Somebody said respect, and I really like that. It's part of the sacredness of life. It's part of the natural scheme of things. I remember when I went and took a class with the Buddhist lamas at the Gyagi Center on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And the first thing that I think Lama Pema came out and said is, death is natural. It's normal. Like, you know, impermanence is natural. It's normal. It's like, oh, what a relief. You know, I think somebody somewhere along the way made us think that there's something wrong with impermanence. But there isn't. It's a natural part of the scheme of things. And when we don't struggle against it, we're in harmony with reality, right? So rituals are a way that we do respect and we embrace impermanence. The summer solstice, like we love to celebrate the longest day and now the days are getting shorter. The winter solstice, we love to celebrate the shortest day and now the days are getting longer. You know, baby blessings, baby namings. There's just ways that we celebrate these rites of passage, these moments in time where change is happening. So I think somebody said, how can we, so somebody said that feeling safe or trusting life is feeling okay to be vulnerable. So that is the question. How do we coexist with feelings of insecurity sometimes and feelings of vulnerability? How do we coexist with that and stay open and have a peaceful heart? Paulos says learning how to live this way is our security. In Buddhism, there's a wonderful teaching called the 5 strengths. It's also called the 5 powers. And the first strength is cultivating strong determination and commitment to relate openly to whatever life presents, including our emotional distress. What's it look like to relate openly to whatever life brings? It's different than avoiding and denying and trying to find a way to get rid of it as fast as possible. It's different than that. It's a practice of being determined to use discomfort as an opportunity for awakening. This is where we start to get wiser, right? So we use what we're given. I love Thich Nhat Hanh. He puts it in such practical terms. He says, use difficult situations like compost, right? Just grow your roses. Grow the garden of your heart and soul, right? So, the discomfort can really grow you. When I lost everything in that fire, that first week I was in shock. I was in shock. I was staying at Chuck's in Mount Shasta, and I was in the back room, and I mostly was curled up in a ball for a while. And I just accepted, okay, that's what I need to do right now. I just need to just be in shock until the shock passes, and just keep breathing. And the grief, I had to face the loss of all the things that I had carried around my whole life, all those precious pictures and, things that I'll never see again. But, I really faced that dark night. It was a dark week or so of the soul, and I had congregants that lost their homes. I was a minister, so I had to get our community through that, even though I was in so much loss. So that was a really new experience for me. Okay, like here's a lot for you to deal with, and then also you have to help everybody else here because everyone's in shock. So, I just went so deep into it and I trusted it. I trusted it. And I got to this great freedom where I just did not care about stuff very much anymore. I got to where I could let it go, and I realized that did not matter. It was the love, it was the relationships in my life, it was the purposefulness in my life. That did matter. And I became really free in a way I would have never chose to go through that, right? But I became free, and now I don't have much stuff. And if I lose it all, I don't really care, you know? It's such a freedom. It's really a freedom. It reminds me of a teaching that Alma would always tell. She loved this story about Alexander the Great, that when Alexander the Great was nearing death, he said, I want to be buried with my arms outside the casket. I want to be in the casket, but I want my arms outside of the casket. And they asked him, why? What the heck? And he said, I want everyone to know there's nothing they take with them. There's nothing they take with them. You come into the world empty-handed, and you leave the world empty-handed. So Alma really loves to tell that story. So we can live in freedom, less attached. I always say, just hold on more lightly, right? We don't want to try to force ourselves to a state we aren't quite ready for, but we can hold on more lightly to everything. That's how we move in that direction. And, you know, it's not caring about things, but it's not fearing as much, right? It's fearing less. It's fearing change less, right? I love stories of people that have found inner freedom, especially through challenging circumstances. So Helen Keller, of course, has always been such an inspiration. She was born healthy. She was a healthy child in 1880 in Alabama. She could see, she could hear, she could walk at the age of 1. She could speak. And then at about a year and a half, she got, they don't know if it was rubella fever or scarlet fever, but that is why she became blind and deaf. And so, even so, she lived this amazing life, an amazing life. And she was just such an exceptional soul. And she somehow drew people to her. And she had a lifelong teacher that helped her develop and grow in spite of her different abilities. And one of the people she became really close to was Mark Twain. I think he was quite a bit older than her. But he was so impressed by her. And I recently read her biography about their relationship. And what she says about him, why she loved him so much, she said, is he treated me like a competent human being. That's why I loved him. But Mark Twain, what he said was his feelings for Helen Keller were forever tinged with admiration and awe. He wrote, I am filled with the wonder of her knowledge, acquired because shut out from all distractions. If I could have been deaf, dumb, and blind, I also might have arrived at something. Which is pretty humble, being that he was one of America's greatest writers. But he recognized her wisdom, her hard-earned wisdom. And here's a bit of wisdom from her. She writes, security is mostly a superstition. It does not exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. I love that. So, in closing, for life to be a daring adventure, we would be wise to make friends with impermanence, with uncertainty, right? Make friends with it as a normal and natural part of life. It's okay that our bodies change. It's okay. It's okay that we age. It's okay that we don't feel okay sometimes. It's okay that life in form is impermanent. It's okay if we can't keep it all together. And it's okay that we can't avoid uncertainty, right? We can bring more compassion to our fears and gently release them, right? And learn to live in more surrender You know, it's an ongoing choice. It's kind of an every moment choice, surrendering more to life and trusting life and living in non-resistance, living like a leaf on a tree, on a stream, right? And just allow life to carry us with all its winding roads and its unknown detours. So may we keep opening. May we all keep opening our hearts to embrace life. May we breathe deeply when we have those moments where we wish it were less impermanent. May we enjoy this dance in all its facets and stay connected to the inner peace that is unaffected by all the changes of this world. Thank you all. Om Shanti.